hello and welcome to yet another Infravision Conversation with OP Aggarwal, who's really the doyen of public transport in India. He's been in the government, he's been in the World Bank, he's been in WRI, and he's done so much work in thinking and discussing and debating urban transport policy in India. Thank you so much, Mr. Aggarwal, for joining us. I should actually call you Dr. Aggarwal, right?
That's okay. Either way is fine. Even OP is fine.
You're also you're also from IIT Delhi, IIT Chennai, IIT Madras, and MIT. So it's marvelous to have you here. And you've also got a new book on urban transport, where you really, I think, condensed your years of analysis and working in the urban transport sector in India. And we will be carrying a link to it in this conversation as well, so that everyone can get to buy that copy. Mr. Aggarwal, right away, I'd like to ask, what would you say is the one success and the one failure since you drafted the urban transport policy in India in 2006? It's been almost, it will be 20 years next year. So when you look back at it, what do you think you got right and what do you think we got wrong?
No, that's a tough one. Let me say that the one thing we got right, to some extent, was the Delhi Metro. The coming of the Delhi Metro. I'm not saying this because of the Delhi Metro per se, but the fact that across the country we began to realize that public transport is important. Till that time, the most important thing that used to happen in managing the congestion was widening roads and building flyovers. I think the Delhi Metro was built very well and showed that public transport has a lot of value. And following the Delhi Metro, many other cities have now started building metro systems. I would call that a success, but I would also call the metro a failure, perhaps one of the biggest failures, simply because it has been looked upon much more as an engineering achievement and not so much as a planning achievement. Metros have been built very well, but I call the metro akin to the human heart. The heart is something that can pump blood, but if you don't have that network of arteries and veins and capillaries, you can't get the blood to flow to different parts of the body. Similarly, the metro is great, but if it doesn't have that connectivity to different parts of the city, it's like a heart which is pumping without the blood going anywhere. That's the analogy I like to give. So the metros have been built well, but where we have failed is in recognizing that it is part of a system and not a system in itself. So you will hear a lot of conversation today about the lack of feeder networks, the lack of good accessibility, because of which the huge amounts spent on the metro are not getting manifested in terms of the right number of people using the metro. So, I'm calling the metro a big success and also a big failure. Let me say it is an engineering success, but it is a planning failure.
And what would be the one failure? Would it be the same, the metro?
No, I'm saying that where we have failed is in recognizing the metro as a part of a bigger system and not planning the entire system, just planning the metro alone and not the larger system. We haven't thought of it as part of a bigger system. We haven't planned the bigger system. That, I think, has been a failure. The other thing which I think we haven't fully recognized is that whatever you may do with metro systems, bus systems are extremely important. And you can build metro in 15, 20, 25 cities. But there are at least 500 cities that need buses. And we haven't recognized the value that buses bring. And even with the cities where we do have buses, we have kept it as something that is to be used only by people who can't afford a personal motor vehicle. So our big concern has been affordability. Keep fares low, doesn't matter if the service quality is poor, with the result that anyone who can afford a two-wheeler has moved to the two-wheeler and is causing all the problems that we see today in our cities. To get a two-wheeler user back to buses, he'll not come into the same kind of buses. You need a much better quality of bus service, which will charge more. You need a kind of a premium service, which may charge 3 to 4 times the normal bus fare, maybe 5 times the normal bus fare. But it must offer conveniences which a two-wheeler user gets from his two-wheeler. So we fail to provide that really good premium bus service which will draw people away from their two-wheelers. I think that has been the other thing that we have failed to do. Delhi, for example, is adding more buses, which is good. But if you just add the same quality of buses, your number of passengers is not going to go up. You get more buses with fewer passengers per bus, and that I see as the problem.
Absolutely. And I think you've also categorized these three things that we need to focus on. One is the overemphasis on privately owned vehicles. And you've also given figures which show that more than 50% of vehicular passenger traffic by 2030 will actually be private vehicular traffic. You've also talked about EV and green energy being used more and more for transport. And I think which is the third thing which I find most interesting is the idea of streets, not just roads, that you have streets for cycling, for walking, because most of India still walks, or still would like to walk to work, or to go to the colony market, as we did when we grew up, but increasingly that has declined. So could we focus a little on these three aspects and talk about what are the ways forward in these three particular aspects?
I think the way forward is the standards for urban roads, I think, needs a relook. The standards for roads have been laid down by the Indian Roads Congress, and I don't think they have really got standards laid down for urban roads. Urban roads are a very different category from highways, and we need to make it mandatory that every road must have a certain width of footpaths. I think that should become law, or at least legally binding. That is what will make walking, and then those footpaths should not get obstructed by lampposts and trees and garbage and other shops coming in there. It has to be walkable. As far as personal vehicles are concerned, I see a ray of hope in the younger generation. See, my generation, the status symbol was the ownership of a personal motor vehicle.
Absolutely.
I think the younger generation, that is not a status symbol for them. And I can give you an example of my daughter who, when she started working in Bangalore, every day she would take an auto rickshaw or take some Uber or something and go to work. And, I said, look, why don't you buy a car instead of taking all this? And she said, no, I don't need a car. So after some time, I felt that, she continued to do that. I thought maybe she didn't have the money to buy a car or was hesitant to spend that kind of money. So I told her, look, I'll pay for the car. Why don't you get a car? And her response was, look, I don't need a car. If you want to spend money on me, get me a good phone. So the status symbol for this generation is this device, and which is a good thing, because if they don't look at the car or the motorbike as a status symbol, they look at the phone as a status symbol. Give it to them. But what we must complement that with is good public transport. And by good public transport, I don't mean a fancy metro. I mean, maybe a metro is fine, but then unless it is properly linked to a larger transport system, then it's not of much value. And second, give them a good bus service. Give them the premium services, because these are people who are earning enough to get a personal vehicle or keep using Ubers. So if you have a premium bus service which charges 5 times what a normal bus does, or 4 times what a normal bus does, they will use it. It can be app-based buses. They know when the bus is going to pick them up. Have a network of services which picks them close to where they live and drops them where they're close to work. I think that's the kind of thing that the city should look at. The beauty of these services is that the government doesn't have to subsidize them, because these are charging a lot more. But surprisingly, this is just not there.
But sir, I do see a kind of resurgence of thinking about urban mobility, which we didn't have in the last 20, 25 years. People didn't really think about, why is my bus service not up to global standards, or why, is my street not walkable anymore? These were not issues that were really debated or even became political issues. Do you see that as a huge change? That at least, because of the issue of pollution, and people now do understand that most of it is linked to vehicular pollution, at least these have become part of the public conversation. And that crucial aspect of citizen awareness is coming about. And perhaps that is where the solutions will also come from.
Well, let's hope it happens. You're right in the sense that there is a lot more conversation about it now. The number of people I know who have left Delhi because of the air quality, waiting for things to improve, is not funny. At least that conversation is happening. But what I also feel is, two things you must remember. The people who manage public transport systems don't use it. Right? And a lot of the people who talk about this pollution and are, as you say, the group that is talking a lot about it, don't even walk. So they're all in their cars. And that's the group that's causing the problem. So, it's one thing to talk about it, but another thing to say that, okay, I'm willing to give up something to get that air quality back. And as far as electric vehicles are concerned, I think electric vehicles is something that we need to move at more strongly. So far, everything that has happened on electric vehicles is through incentives. In the sense, we recognize that the electric vehicle costs a little more. So we give you a subsidy, which will encourage you to buy that vehicle. It's been an incentive-driven initiative, which is okay in the initial years. But I think today in some of the cities like Delhi, where air quality is becoming a serious matter, we need to start looking at some kind of regulation or mandating, electric vehicles, or mandating much cleaner technologies. There has been a history in the past where through a judicial order, Delhi had to shift to CNG. But it shifted to CNG for a certain segment of vehicles, which I think is the right segment. I'm not saying it should expand everywhere, but that is the right segment. That means public buses, taxis, auto rickshaws, and I would extend it a little more now to the urban freight vehicles. With Amazon and other these delivery services, a lot of the freight vehicles are now on the roads. So I would say this segment should slowly start getting mandated into being only electric. So that would be one. So some gentle mandates are necessary. I think that is important. One of the reasons why many more people have not shifted is the availability of charging facilities. Now, this is always going to take time. It's going to take time because charging stations will not get enough users unless you have enough electric vehicles. And you won't have enough electric vehicles because they'll say, where is the charging? So it's a chicken and egg situation. And the way to get around it, in my view, is to look at some of these vehicles that drive a lot during the day. That means buses, taxis, auto rickshaws, urban freight vehicles, and maybe even pool vehicles, government or large corporates, pool vehicles which drive a lot during the day. They should get mandated into being electric vehicles.
What do we do about the streets and the roads?
So as I said, we need to set standards. We need to set standards on what the streets should look like. What should be the design and the cross-section of the street. That we need to set standards and make them legally binding.
Right. That will put a lot of builders and construction magnates to trouble, which is good.
But you see, what happens is the moment we start putting more footpaths in built-up areas, you get space for footpaths by only taking away space from cars. And the car owners are the most influential. They make the loudest noise and they don't walk. So politically, that becomes a problem. So this is what happens.
We've seen the encroachment of public spaces of streets in the poshest of colonies by car owners. All the cars are parked outside the home.
So that is what is happening. Because if it is within the residential areas, I think it is the RWAs that should wake up.
Right.
The RWAs need to wake up and say that, look, they have to be either empowered or should proactively do something to remove this. What is also happening in many of the RWAs, the colony that I live in Delhi, was initially these houses were designed for people who would only own two-wheelers. So I'm a first-time owner of a flat in one of those colonies, and the house has a space for a two-wheeler to be parked. There's a two-wheeler garage. But now each of those houses has on an average at least two cars. They don't own two-wheelers. So that little space has been given out, rented out to somebody who runs a tailoring shop or someone who runs a little grocery shop. These are local conveniences, which is fine. But then the two cars are occupying space which wasn't available for them. So, which is okay. I mean, I'm not saying that we need to deny them the cars. But what needs to happen in these colonies is that then you need to create public parking within the colony. And people should be given that space to park there, maybe charge a monthly rent for the parking, but create that parking space.
That seems so doable, but I think that brings us back to another very important point that you've highlighted repeatedly, is the local government. And that weak local governance is one of the issues that is holding back proper urban planning in India.
That's true. I think local governance needs to be empowered a lot more. And this is, of course, it's not so much of a problem in Delhi because MCD is quite powerful. But I think in a lot of other cities, the local governments are not adequately empowered. So, I think the RWAs need to be given more authority. And of course, the local, the mayors and the local city governments need to be given more authority. I would in fact even say that if you look at the kind of services that cities need to provide, look at the whole range of services. I would say that there are certain services that are best provided at the local level, and there are some services that are better provided at a more regional level, And there are perhaps other services that are provided more at a state level. So we need to identify which are these services that are best provided at the local level and completely empower the local government to do that. But there are services that are better provided at a regional level, which cannot be provided at a local city level. And we need to create these regional bodies. Let's take the metro, for example. Metros in most cities cannot be provided by the local city in India. Even in a city like Delhi, the Delhi metro runs across 4 states. So you need something like a regional body that provides that. Primary schools are best provided by the local city, local administration. Maybe colleges are provided at a higher level. Universities have to be provided at an even higher level. So there are economies of scale for different kinds of services. And we need to identify which of these services gets the right economy of scale at the local level and empower the local level to provide that service.
This brings me to yet another point that you've talked about quite often, is that citizen awareness also needs to be translated into actionable results. And it can only happen if there is some accountability to the people that they're asking the questions to. So how do we do that? For instance, in Delhi, we saw such an outcry against pollution, but it hasn't really made much of a difference. How do we resolve issues like that? So you have citizen awareness, but it just remains bottled up as a local outrage issue.
See, the problem in Delhi is it is too big. Citizens can only talk among themselves. They don't know whom to reach out to. That is the problem in Delhi. Who do you reach out to? Is it the local councillor? Is the local councillor in a position to solve the air quality problems? It's beyond his jurisdiction. He can't do it. The problems of air quality are, as you say, they set up a commission for air quality management, whose jurisdiction goes beyond Delhi, because they recognize that there is an airshed approach to dealing with this. But are there people who really, is that commission looking at people? Is that commission, I don't really get to see what that commission is doing. It has good people. But I think they should look at much more outreach, listening to people, having conversations with people, getting a sense of what is happening. I think much more outreach needs to happen there. They have good people. I've met a number of them. They're very good people there, but I think the outreach needs to go up. At least people should know what they're doing. And I would think that forums at which they educate people on what they're trying to do and getting feedback from the people on what they're trying to do will help in getting support from people on their initiatives. It will also give them ideas on what are the right things to do. So that kind of a public outreach, to my mind, is extremely useful. Public is wise. I remember when we were drafting the National Urban Transport Policy, I think one of the biggest success factors in that policy was not consciously done, but happened because of various reasons. There was extensive consultation, extensive national consultation. And I was amazed at the kind of ideas that came through this consultation. When we sat through as a group of experts on the kind of thing that we came up with, the final policy was vastly improved because of this consultation process. And what the consultation also does is two things, I think. One, it gets the media aware of it and the media starts writing. Positive, negative, whatever it is, the media starts writing and the media gives you suggestions. And the public starts writing, a variety of experts start writing, and you get a lot of ideas from this. I think we need to recognize that the public is well aware, public knows, there is a lot of wisdom there. And this kind of consultation goes a long way in improving policies. That's the reason today why my own personal view is nobody talks against the urban transport policy simply because there was very wide consultation. People say it's not been implemented well. People say that, some people have even told me that it should have been made as a law rather than just a policy. But no one said that this is wrong about the policy or that is wrong about the policy. And this is because it was through a consultative process that we got a lot of ideas from people.
Also, talking about urbanization in India, the small and medium-sized towns really are now where so much action is. And that is still something that we can repair, we can plan for, we can fix. How do we see urban transportation in these growth hubs?
So, how people move in a lot of the smaller cities is very, very different from how people move in the bigger cities. Unfortunately, the smaller cities have really not been getting attention, the kind of attention that they really ought to get now. And they are going to be very important for us in the years ahead, because if you look at the national ambition of becoming a $30 trillion economy, it will have to focus a lot on manufacturing. And the government has also already set up a manufacturing mission. Now, if manufacturing has to grow, it will not grow in the bigger cities, because the bigger cities, you don't have enough land at an affordable price. So the smaller cities are an absolute must for manufacturing. So I would say that we need to start looking at these smaller cities in a much more proactive manner. The way people travel there now is very different from, as I said, the bigger cities. But getting an understanding of how people travel there, you have no public transport in those places. Public transport, if at all, is all informal minibuses or auto rickshaws or tempos, those kinds of things. And how do we sort of streamline them? How do we bring in better bus services? A lot of the problems in those cities are just the simple road quality. Simple road quality improvements, having footpaths which don't exist in many of these smaller cities, yet most people are walking or cycling. So getting the road network right, I think this is where investments need to be made. Now, if you look at both the JNNURM and the Smart Cities mission, both of them, the JNNURM, the major program looked at 67 cities, but there was a sister program which covered 500 cities. And similarly with the Smart Cities mission, while that looked at 100, there was the Amrut program that covered 500 cities. And I don't know how much they've invested on this kind of road infrastructure or walking and cycling infrastructure. And secondly, 500 is still a small bit out of the 7,000 cities that the country has. So how do we start looking at a program where we start investing in the smaller cities in a bigger way? I think that is going to be important, because these smaller cities don't have the financial resources for their infrastructure. Bigger cities, if they collect their property taxes well, can generate that kind of money, but the bigger cities don't really have that. So I think a focus needs to shift to the tier 2, tier 3 cities in a much bigger way. So that's where the economic development, the future economic development of India will happen in those smaller cities.
And transport will be a very critical part of this as the engine of economic growth. How people go to work, how they use their leisure time, how they and their families spend time together. It'll be very interesting. So is anyone thinking about this in, say, NITI Aayog? I'm sure you're all thinking about it. There is a lot of planning going on.
The one good program that the NITI Aayog has come up with, and I'm actually quite a fan of that program, is the idea of growth hubs. Looking at each growth hub. Now, they have named the growth hub around that primary city, the anchor city. But the region that is covered is not just that city. The region is much wider. And when you cover a much wider region, there are a number of smaller cities that come into its ambit. So if you take, say, a Mumbai, but the area of the Mumbai growth hub goes well beyond MMRDA's region. So all the smaller cities that come within that region are all part of that coverage. So I think that's a good thing, because what it also does is it recognizes the linkage between the rural areas and the urban areas. You can't think of an urban area only around its administrative boundary. The interlinkage between that urban area and its rural hinterland can't be ignored. But the growth hub is really taking a region that is so much wider that not only are smaller cities, but the rural areas within that region also come into play. And you're looking at an improvement in that entire region because it is going to drive your economy. That, I think, is a very good initiative, but it needs to be taken forward. NITI Aayog is in a position to pilot the idea, get something started, but its mandate is not to really drive a whole program of this magnitude.
And, the idea of UMTA, an integrated public transport authority, which extends beyond just the urban, becomes a regional transport authority in a way. Something that Odisha is actually doing quite well, I think. At least that's one state I think is doing well. But that again is something that needs to be looked at quite carefully. It's mandated, but not everybody follows it. Not every state follows.
You see, the idea of the UMTA is really to have an integrated system. Let's take the example of Delhi itself. The Delhi Metro and the DTC don't talk to each other. The DTC and those private cluster buses don't talk to each other. We don't know how many agencies are building roads in Delhi and how many agencies are providing parking places in Delhi. So there is nobody who is looking at transport in the city in a completely holistic manner. If you had somebody like that, you would find, so DTC is unable to expand its fleet because they say we don't have enough depot space. But there are, and there is a shortage of parking in the city also. Now, if you look at DTC's existing depots, they are only used for parking buses at night. Is it possible for DTC to allow its own depots to be used for parking by private vehicles during the day? And is it possible for nearby markets where you have some parking to be made available to DTC at night? Because DTC needs parking at night. But because it is so fragmented, we are not optimizing our available assets. But if there was one agency that could look at transport in a holistic manner in all its dimensions in the city, they would be able to recognize, okay, this parking is used at this time, this parking is used at this time, get one to help the other. I don't know if you're familiar with Sarojini Nagar market.
Of course.
Then Sarojini Nagar market, there is so much parking needed there. And there is some parking available there, fair bit of parking available there. And the Sarojini Nagar depot of DTC is barely half a kilometer from the market, maybe 1 kilometer from the market, not more than that. But Sarojini Nagar depot's space is free during the day. Sarojini Nagar market, their parking is free during the night. And all DTC has to do...
Great solutions. Somebody needs to listen to all this.
But
I hope they will.
Across Delhi, you will find so many things like this.
Right.
Look at cinema halls. They have parking spaces available, which is free for some part of the day when it can be used by others. But it belongs to the cinema hall, so they will not let it be used by someone else. There's a lot of these assets which depots, when DTC says that they don't have depot space, there's no rule which says that buses should only be parked on the ground floor.
Right.
Right? So what is stopping them from building a multi-storied complex where you can have 3 floors for bus parking and another 8 floors for office complexes? That will get them so much revenue, they won't need a subsidy. So, it's just that people have to get innovative and not be stuck with the old ideas alone.
Wonderful. I think, sir, we could continue this conversation forever. I'll have to come back to you for another round. There's so many interesting ideas and innovative solutions that you've suggested. Thank you so much for your time. And I do hope we can do another round soon.
Sure.
And to all of us, all of you listening out there, please do buy a copy of Ms. Aggarwal's new book. It's really an eye-opener, and it'll give you a sense of how we've come to where we are and what the solutions are for the future. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Kaveree. Lovely talking to you.
Thank you very much.